is Ashley Loria. I work at the Ridgewood Public Library. The Ridgewood Public Library Square that you see on your screen is my colleague Justin Contanicolo. And we just want to thank you all for attending our webinar. We plan to discuss the parenting strategies for preschool age children during the COVID-19 pandemic. So we are very happy to welcome local psychologist Dr. Kevin Giangrasso to address your questions, and he'll be leading our webinar. Kevin specializes in child and adolescent psychology and the treatment of anxiety and stress. So we hope that the information that you gather from tonight's webinar will help you during this tough time. Very poignant topic we'll be discussing. If you have any additional questions at all, you're welcome to submit them in the chat. Or you can click the icon to raise your hand, or try to interrupt. Kevin, I'm sure you don't mind if you have questions. And again, as a reminder, after tonight's program, the recording will be emailed to you. And if you have additional questions after tonight's webinar, I'll include Dr. Giangrasso's email address, so you're welcome to send him questions via email as well. So without further ado, I'm happy to hand it over to Dr. Kevin Giangrasso.
Thanks, Ashley. And thanks for having me again. I like doing these talks. Just for everybody who's in the audience right now, we have the ability for this one to join in or not, and to for you guys to turn on your microphones and actually ask live questions. And so, of course, nobody has to do that, and feel free to keep your mics off and your video off if you want to. But if you do want to join by video, certainly you're welcome to, and it might make it a little bit more interactive and interesting, because I'm sure every question that anybody in this group has, probably another person has that same or a similar question. And so it can often just enrich the discussion when we have those live questions. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. So I have slides for tonight that I'll go through with some key information that's important. I also have the questions that folks who registered sent in ahead of time that I'll address. Feel free to interrupt me or raise your hand in the raise hand feature on Zoom if you want to ask a question. The other thing that we do, that I like to do in these talks, is use the chat feature. And so I want to kind of just test that out now. If you could locate your chat feature and just answer with whatever comes to mind when I say the word preschooler. So if I say preschooler, what word or couple words comes to mind? Please put that in the chat so we can sort of start the participation off. Let's see. Energy. Okay, so I got 3 responses so far. So one person said energy, one person said rowdy, cute, and curious, right? Sweet, yes. So those are all, yeah, great, cute children. Yeah, this age group that we're talking about, around ages 3 to 5, these are young kids. I mean, they are just getting to the point where we feel comfortable, putting them, that we start to think that they need school, right? They need to be around their peers, and they're starting to emerge into their sort of more of their own personalities and figuring out the world. Oh, snacks. Yeah, so snacks are so important for young kids, right? We know if we're with children of preschool age, if we don't give them their snacks, we kind of know what happens. It's not always fun. They are imaginative. They are fast, lacking judgment, right? So they're impulsive by nature, for sure. That's all true. Great, thanks. What is the if we could go on with this chat, the next prompt that I'd like to ask you to answer is, what is your least favorite thing about preschool children? Write a word or a couple words. Right, so tantrums, stubborn, needing constant attention, doing the opposite of what I asked. They are naturally oppositional. They have trouble listening, even especially when safety is an issue. And storytelling. Oh, okay. So, you know, we know that young children of this age love to tell their own stories of what is going on or how they see the world. Often, a lot of it is made up. And sometimes they just seem to absolutely need to tell that story right then and right now, right there. One of the things that happens that is happening and happens at times of high stress for young kids is that they may start to be even a little bit more clingy than they usually would be, or they might even be exhibiting more tantrums. Because the world is sort of changing in front of them, or they see maybe anxiety and stress in their caretakers. It is hard to know what is real versus imagined. Yeah, so when we think about children between around the ages of 3 to 5, the line between reality and fantasy is not that clear. And so for example, watching a scary movie or watching even an exciting TV show or movie, they are not necessarily thinking, well, this is a TV show and it's not real. They truly will get lost in that story. And sometimes that means they get upset or sad or scared. And sometimes that means they get really super excited, but in a way that what is imagined on that screen actually to them is real. So to kind of focus back on.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Oh no.
Hi, my name is Fiona, and just what you just said about that blurred line about them getting engrossed in a movie. We've tried to have movie night a couple of times with my 3.5-year-old, and it's pretty hilarious because he can't make it past like 10 minutes of any movie, no matter how tame it is. And I just had a question, if in that sense, like, should we go with it, like turn off the movie and that's it and never to be spoken of again? Or is that the kind of thing that you should try again? I mean, not that a movie is the most important, but just kind of in the line of being fearful about things.
That's Fiona, thank you so much. That's an excellent question. And I think it hits on one of the themes that we'll talk about as we go forward. So we, at this age, we want to really start to teach our kids distress tolerance. And so this is the concept that goes across, difficult experiences, whether it's anxiety or just not wanting to do something, feeling uncomfortable, sometimes physically feeling uncomfortable. These are all things that, as we grow up, we want kids to be able to do. We want them to be able to tolerate their own distress and kind of soothe themselves, right? And so with a movie, it's kind of a judgment call, right? So if you're watching, on one hand, it depends on the movie, right? If the movie is definitely far above their developmental level, then probably a good idea to just turn it off and move on and watch that movie yourself later. If it's not, if it's a children's movie, like kind of Frozen, right? Frozen is an example.
That's the movie it was.
Okay, yeah. So Frozen, the first Frozen, I know both those movies so well at this point. It's sickening, but there's that big like snow monster that happens in the first Frozen. That's actually pretty scary. but it's also fluffy and snow, and it's within this fantasy. And so maybe the first time you want to turn off the movie, right? And you certainly don't want him to be so upset. But if he's starting to hear maybe friends on play dates who are also watching that movie, or he becomes interested, it might make sense to turn that 10 minutes into 15 minutes and sort of ride the line between showing him that it is okay, but not going so far that you give him a uh, like a scary experience that's going to stick with him, right? And at the end of the day, you want him, even at 3.5, you want him to kind of drive the ship of what those decisions are made. Like if you can kind of tell that he really does want to watch it and he's really interested, but he's clinging to you a little bit too much, or he's saying he's just scared in that moment, but you feel like you can kind of get him over that, it might be worth it to push it a little bit. But not so much that you have to watch this movie. And of course, because it's a movie, like at the end of the day, he doesn't have to watch anything. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Hi, Kevin. We also have a hand raise, Indira.
At 3.5 to 4.5, there are going to be additional experiences that learning that little bit of distress tolerance now is going to help him for, times of, I don't know, being alone in a preschool classroom, or playing free play with other kids. These are those moments where getting over that hump of that initial stress is going to help him make new relationships and grow in that way. And that's what we want to do tonight. We want to talk about, want to think along the lines of knowledge, skills, and ways of thinking about these young children that help us both understand where they're coming from and help them manage their own distress in new and different ways.
You mentioned a key phrase in the last conversation, play dates. That's
Yeah.
a big problem in this COVID time. We take care of our grandchildren 3 days a week because we've been nervous about having them go to daycare.
Yeah.
In fact, my niece just had to pull her kids out of daycare and go into quarantine because somebody tested positive there.
Yeah.
But the big issue is it's now almost a year, and our granddaughter, who is almost 4, has missed playing with children, and we become her major playmates, and she's happy with that, but she does notice the difference, and I don't see any good resolution unless we want to take certain risks. Once in a while, she does get together with my nephew. Um, when it seems like the larger situation has allowed for a safe meeting.
Yeah.
But that's about it, and that's only been a handful of times. So I mean, I think that's a big problem. I imagine that most of the people on the call are dealing with the same thing. I mean, I see that a lot of children are not really as strict in terms of that, and of course that's the risk you take. But we have been fairly strict, so it presents a problem.
Yeah. I have no doubt, and I think I see people in the chat agreeing. Yes, definitely, absolutely, with what you're bringing up. I think it's really important. So because this has gone on for so long, right? The balance. If we were, socially distanced or isolating ourselves for a month or two, right? The answer to the question is very different than
Sure.
it is now, almost a year. And at the end of the day, there are a couple things that I would point to, and these are sort of, I guess, the bullet points. Number one, it's got to be a personal family decision of when to take those risks and what are the factors that play into that. Because at the end of the day, what is it? There are risks on both sides. There's a risk for losing that social connection or that social development at a crucial age. But on the other hand, there's the very real safety health risk that our current world is posing to us. And so, whenever those play dates happen, they, you want to mitigate the risk. And it's that much harder now because it's cold outside, right? So I know one of the recommendations have been to be doing like outdoor play dates when the weather was warmer and reduce the risk in that way. At the end of the day, it's a family decision. But
No, I know that. I guess I'm more interested in what you think the consequences are of this isolation for a year.
so the second bullet point is resilience, right? At the end of the day, kids, humans, we are resilient beings. And so when it comes down to it, I I do think it's important that we remind ourselves of the resilience of young children, right? They are built to be developing and growing, and that growth and development never happens in a straight line, right? It looks more like this over time. And so this is sort of a big blip, and yes, the isolation and the lack of play dates certainly impacts them, but I would argue that that's more of a short-term impact, and we should worry much less about the long-term social implications of those of having no play dates, because they have so much more life to live after this, right? If a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old, I mean, there's a lot of time to build those skills and to build those abilities at making good, healthy interpersonal connections. So my recommendation is sort of do what you have to do for now, be as safe as you possibly can, when and if it is possible to give them the opportunity for connections, and try to, where is it, fill their buckets. So if we think of, they have psychological needs, they have physical needs, and they have social needs, and wherever you can, to try to give them in each of those domains as much as you can while keeping them safe. That's what we have to do right now, and remember that they're going to recover, because that's what children are built to do. They're built to grow, to be resilient, to be able to handle a lot, and this is one of those times.
Thank you.
Sure. Kids of this age are opening their minds and their hearts to the world. So this is the time of development when they're starting to focus more on adults and notice other kids and want to play with other kids, be asking to go on play dates or asking to go to school. Physically, they start to be able to do things like ride a tricycle or use scissors. They start to notice individual differences between boys and girls. They can do the activities of daily living, like dressing and undressing themselves or helping to do so. They can remember stories, especially stories that they made up or are important to them in some way. When there are certain things that we as caretakers can do to help those our preschoolers to go through those stages of development in the best ways. So behaviorally, we're going to have to, and based on some of the chats, right? Tantrums, they're stubborn, they don't have great judgment, they're needing constant attention. We're going to have to tell them no. Sometimes we're going to have to set limits. But whenever possible, we want to try to identify the behavior or the thing that we want them to do instead. Because at this age, the reality is they probably don't know. They know some things, but there's a lot that they don't know about what the expectations are for their behavior. So we want to actually explicitly tell them, and we don't want to get stuck in the rut of just saying no all the time. We want to give them the alternative of what we want them to be doing. Along the same lines, we want to be using grown-up words. We want to be using adult language as a model to them so that they know, they start to learn those words. They start to be exposed to them. We want to explicitly help them to problem solve when they're upset. Because again, they tend to be all heart, right? Whether they're upset and tantruming or whether they're excited and have boundless energy. We want to help them to teach them how to get through the steps to solving a problem so that they can learn to help themselves feel better. When we're giving them choices, and we, whenever possible, want to give them choices of what they're doing or what they eat or what toys they want to play with, but we want to give them a limited number of simple choices so that every option that we give them is safe and okay in the current situation, but we give them a little bit of control to start to learn, well, I can like certain things and I can not like certain things, or I can have preferences for how I play, because that's going to map on to how they create those interpersonal relationships as they grow up. During this time, self-care for adults starts to be really important. I mean, it's always important, but we want to make sure that we are aware that this situation, this anxiety, and that we all experience in this isolation, it hits the whole family. And so think about on an airplane, if the airplane is having trouble, you want to put your own oxygen mask on first before you put it on your child. If you're not there, or your grandchild, if you're not in a good place and grounded and healthy, you can't help to model that for them, and you can't help them best. So you got to take care of yourself first. With problem solving, we model for children based on what we do all the time. They are, at this age, they are constantly watching us, and trying to repeat what we do, trying to act like us, trying to learn from that. We don't want to model for them that we have all the answers. We actually want to model that there are some things that we don't know, but we know how to cope with them. And I think that's really important when we're feeling anxious or depressed or just low, given isolation and current pandemic concerns. We want to model that it's okay to be angry or sad, and we're going to do our best to figure out how to get through that and how to feel better. We want to tolerate the tough moments. When there are a lot of people, routine drift just refers to, everybody sort of being together in the house all the time, and different routines and habits drift into new realities because of a different way of living. We want to notice it, and routine change is not always bad, but we want to be cognizant of the ways it may be impacting children. And then I'll just drive home the point of resiliency. We are absolutely built with it. Long term, kids are going to get used to being around other kids again. They're going to relearn those social skills, and build interpersonal relationships. We have to, we do them a service by reminding them and reminding ourselves that they are strong and powerful, and we are all going to be able to get through this. Any questions, comments, complaints?
One thing I've noticed with our granddaughter is when we take care of her, she really has our undivided attention, which is both a good thing and a bad thing.
Yeah.
I mean, for us, it's fine. I mean, for her though, I worry because, like, for example, if one of us has to take care of something else, she immediately notices and says, "You're not paying attention to me."
Right.
And I suppose that in a more normal environment where she was interacting with, kids on and off, and they'd be more, movement and change, there wouldn't be that kind of like, you know, undivided attention. And so I wonder if she's going to get so used to that it's going to be a problem in adjustment.
Do you enjoy it?
Oh yeah. It's fine. I mean, it's wonderful. I mean, by the time she's gone, we're exhausted. But other than that, it's all good. I mean, they're good kids, and we love it. I mean, what could be better? We're very lucky because I know a lot of grandparents can't be with their grandkids.
Yeah.
So we're in our own bubble. Nobody goes anywhere, and so it's all fine. So that's no. I'm more concerned. That's why I'm in this webinar, because I'm interested in just what's best for her.
So it is, it's good for her to have that attention, right? It's a silver lining of all of this in a lot of ways, right? Because she, at how old is she?
She'll be 4 in April.
Yeah, she's 4. So at this age, I mean, she needs that, right? She needs that attention, and I'm sure she craves it and loves it.
Oh yeah.
There is a piece to this that's distress tolerance, right? So when you go and do something else, she's experiencing distress at that moment because you're not all dialed into her. That's something that you can, if you're interested in kind of playing with that, you can, by trying to increase some time, some of her maybe alone time, or focused on something else. And you can teach her to tolerate that distress by giving her time away. And it can start with as little as like 30 seconds. It doesn't have to be a long time. But if you practice taking yourself away, you give her the opportunity to practice being okay with not having that attention right then and there. And then that potentially translates to future social interactions when this all, when things truly do open up and she has opportunities for new play dates, she now has that skill of tolerating the distress of her friends not always paying attention to her. So you can't, does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's it. So I would encourage you to think about that as a skill, distress tolerance as a skill. And whenever you can give her that opportunity to practice it, you're giving her a lesson that she can then use, in school, when she ends up in school, or with play dates, or with, even with her parents. That sense of, like, I'm okay just finding something to do. And it doesn't have to take long. 30 seconds, a minute. In a 4-year-old's mind, 30 seconds could be an eternity. And the added benefit is it allows you to, go to the bathroom, or get a snack, or do little things, while she's there. Yeah. Another point that I just thought of is that there's a confidence builder in that, right? So if any of us, when we do something new that's a little bit scary, This is true of a 4-year-old in the same way that it's true maybe of a 40-year-old. When you try something new that is a little bit uncomfortable and you end up being successful with it, that can fuel future, healthy risk taking. And that can be really a good thing for someone's life. All right. Let me see. Okay, so I'm just gonna kind of go back to these slides. I like to make this point about watching your diet. So this is true for them as it in the same way that it's true for us adults. Your diet just doesn't just have to do with food. It's food, it's what news you watch, it's how much sleep you get, how much physical activity you have the opportunity to do, time, especially now with it being so cold, time outdoors, fresh air is really important to keep getting. Having hobbies and interests both for them and for you, it's important as we stay isolated, and we live this new way of living. It can be really easy to forget about that stuff and kind of get stuck in a rut, and that's not good for children, it's not good for us. We want to try to maintain that balance as much as we can. So other themes, this is a time of grief and loss for many of us, whether that's loss of loved ones or loss of experience. That is a reality that, as much as we want to run away from it or avoid it, maybe we just can't. And preschoolers are going to also experience that grief and loss, albeit in a very different way and through a different developmental lens. But the stress and the difficult feelings that happen as a result of grief and loss definitely do trickle down to our kids. And we want to be aware of that, not to shelter them from it, but actually, I would argue to let them in a developmentally appropriate way to it by clearly sharing with them that there are things that are happening that are difficult, and that we can be strong in the face of difficulty and learn to deal with it. But we also want to acknowledge how they're feeling and validate how they're feeling. They might be confused, or they might be scared. They might, have questions, have had questions, or continue to have questions about, why do we wear masks? Why can't I go to school? Or why can't I do a play date with so and so? All of these types of questions that I think as adults we don't really have. I mean, we have answers, but we don't have really satisfying answers for them. I think it's okay to leave that open a little bit and to show them, even at age 3, to show them that we don't have those answers. We ourselves are upset about it, and we as a family are going to be okay. I think that, and that last piece is really important. It's we don't have the answers, we're upset, and we're in it together, and we love you as our child, and we are going to figure this out. That's a that is absolutely okay and very healthy, even at this young age. The other thing, this third bullet point, don't make assumptions about how your child is feeling. And I'll probably say this a couple more times before we're over tonight, but we want to try to look at understanding children's experience through a developmental lens. So we want to understand what their experience is, or what they might be thinking, by trying to sit in their shoes as a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old. Our worries about coronavirus or about the world are not going to be their worries. And their worries are most likely centered around themselves and their life, what they like to do or what they want to do. Sometimes imaginary realities that they are thinking about, stories or fantasies that they have. But we don't want to assume, for example, we don't want to assume that the child is anxious when we're feeling anxious. They might not be feeling anxious at all. They might just be angry, or they might be, sad or confused. And the only way we really know truly how they're feeling is by giving them the words and then listening, trying to hear what they say to us and teaching them what certain words mean in a way that they can understand. And that can be one of the most rewarding ways of talking to a young child, is just giving them the space to kind of talk about whatever's on their mind, in a way that you might understand half of it, or you might understand all of it, but you get a sense of what they are thinking in their own brain, and then you can support that, as opposed to what I think we tend to do about each other is assume, well, he must feel or she must feel this way or that way. We want to try to inhibit that reflex. Any questions, comments? Okay. So these are some of the questions that we received in the registration. I'm just going to try to go through to identify a couple that might be helpful. Actually, anybody who's in the audience, you see these questions on the screen. Is there one in particular that you'd like me to talk about or you'd like to ask about, either in the chat or by video? Hi, Justin.
Hi, Kevin. I actually had a question.
Yeah.
So, as you know, working from home, and I've gotten to the point where I have somewhat of a routine with my little one who is almost 3. But I feel like there are times where I'm just very dependent on the television, like TV. Like coloring books are great, like they hold her attention for like maybe 15 minutes, and other like puzzles and things like that are great, but she still needs that attention like all the time. And the only time I can really get any work done during the day, not during nap time, is when, I plop her in front of the TV with a snack.
Yeah.
And I know, like, I know it's expected to have like Zoom overload, right? And to have like screen time is going to be more than usual at this time period. But like, I don't know, like, should I be doing more? Like, is like at times where I'm just kind of like frustrated and I have like nothing, like I need to get stuff done, but I also need to pay attention to her at the same time. So like, it's kind of, I can't be the only one that's going through this. But I thought it might be a good topic to discuss as a question. I personally.
Yeah, no, thank you for bringing that up. I'm sure that, yeah, I mean, myself included, right? It's a question, right? We tend to feel like we're doing something wrong by putting them in front of a TV. And yeah, there is a point where it's too much. But I guess how I would answer that is that there's competing needs in that environment, right? Where you need to work, And she needs, attention, and she has, she's young, right? She just can't be, fully independent. We shouldn't expect her to be. Um, one of the things that I heard someone say that I thought was really good was to think about different types of screen time, right? And so there are, for more school-age kids, right? This person said, you think of screen time, if it's screen time for educational purposes or for school, then it doesn't count, right? It doesn't count against screen time because that is just the best we have right now. And it's not that it's not that it's good to be in front of a screen for that long, but as a practical matter, like, we have to use screens because of the realities. And I would say think about it as something similar for your daughter, right? If it's a um, educational show that is teaching something, that is, having her come away with something beneficial, then okay, like there's an added benefit. And then I would also try to not invalidate your own need for time, right? And putting your own oxygen mask on, taking care of yourself so that you can have a little bit more energy to take care of her. And even if the TV show isn't educational, or it's like just feels like a little bit too much for today, I think it's okay for to lose that battle to win the war. Like, I think that's okay, and I think we need to give ourselves a little bit of treat ourselves like humans, right? And say, like, we need things too. And especially for this age group, like, they need a lot of attention, and they do not do a very good job of taking care of themselves. And it can be downright dangerous, right, for them to do things on their own. Yes. So Fiona, thank you for that suggestion. There are some great free PBS Kids games for young kids that seem somewhat educational. I completely agree. There are what's the Khan Academy? Khan Academy is one app. There's a ton of stuff on PBS. There's TV shows, things like Eleanor Wonders Why, or Creative Galaxy, or even Daniel Tiger. Like, these are all PBS programs that they're excellent. I mean, they're teaching social skills, they're teaching emotional awareness, really good stuff. And they're super
Street is a big deal at our house. I said Sesame Street's a big deal in our house. So yeah, I don't know. I just kind of felt like, when I first started off with the kid, we were very good with like limiting her screen time and like just doing stuff with her. But now that like I don't have that, like I don't have the luxury of just like doing. So these are some good suggestions. We also do like YouTube videos of like story times and things like that. So we try to switch it up like when we can, but I just kind of, I guess I needed to hear that it's okay for myself.
Okay. It's okay. And think about the resilience. Think about, just because she's watching more TV than you'd like right now doesn't mean that in a year and a half she will be, because she'll be engaged in other stuff. Yeah. By the way, I think this is the age range where those somewhat perfectionistic tendencies of parenting, of like, we're really keeping the line on screen time, every day, kind of fall apart, because kids of this age start to become three-nagers, and doing things that they're just less, they have more agency in their own worlds, and they are harder to keep to their routines and stuff.
So we have about 10 minutes left.
Okay.
So if anybody else would like to ask Kevin some questions, or if you want to go through the questions that were posed during registration, that's whatever you want to do, Kevin.
I think what I'll ask one more time if anybody has any particular questions, and then if not, I'll choose a couple of these questions that are on the board, but I'll just give, I guess, 30 seconds for anybody else. Okay. I see suggestions for grandparents up again, and I'll just address that quickly because so the suggestions for grandparents are not any different, in my opinion, than suggestions for parents, right? When you're in the role of a caretaker, there are these these developmental concerns or developmental considerations that you want to keep in mind. I think one of the differences of grandparents is that you have the opportunity to have a discrete amount of time that you're with your grandchild, and then they kind of go back to the care if that's the care arrangement. That is nice because it allows you to give a lot of attention and then know that when, let's just say, like 6 o'clock comes or whatever time it is, you can be exhausted and just like chill out, right? So you can, in some ways, you can give, it's similar to how a teacher maybe goes through the school day where they give their all and they're all in, knowing that when 3:15 comes, they can take a break. That's really nice in a lot of ways.
Well, it's true. You're delighted when they come and you're delighted when they leave.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's that's a reality of your role in their lives that really gives them something special because it allows you to give that much more attention and be more maybe be more deliberate about what you're teaching them or how you're being with them.
I will say that my daughter and her husband have the same issue with the TV because they both work at home. But one thing that we can do because we're retired is we never have the TV on here. And we actually kind of convinced her there is no TV here, even though it's on the wall. But we've never had it on while she's here. So at least there's some balance there.
And she gets a little break when she's at your house. That's great. That's great.
That's nice.
That's nice.
I heard from your daughter, but what we deal with my mother-in-law is then when our son comes home, he's used to having got that constant attention all day long, and then he is disappointed with us when we're not giving it to him. So you really, I'm sure she appreciates the time you spend with him, but then also has to deal with the other side of that.
Yeah. And so there's another question that came in that says, suggestions for fostering our children's comfort with other kids once the world is safer again. So what, Fiona, your daughter or son?
My son, but I was just thinking that maybe his daughter has noticed the same thing about her kid coming home from the grandparents' house.
What's probably happening there, right, is the child is experiencing some distress, right? They've gotten all of this attention. It feels so good. And it's just like, I want more and more and more of it. And then that's not there in the same way anymore. That's uncomfortable. But it's also, you can reframe that as actually a learning experience for the child, because it is an opportunity for them to learn that there are different people who love them with different roles in their life, and switching from one to another is, there are pros and cons to both, and tolerating that distress of not having that full-on attention anymore can translate to other interpersonal situations in their life. It can teach them that skill that that then they can use when, say, the world is safer again. So teaching distress tolerance helps them to be set up to re-enter an opened up community in a
Would you
way.
recommend doing that in a simple way, like say the kid comes home from grandparents' house after having a great time, and then just that transition time where then he's just having a little bit of a meltdown because you're not giving the same attention maybe that he was getting all day long, and it's like dinner time and you're trying to cook dinner, and then maybe like some other people are saying then an option is to set them in front of a TV, but that doesn't always seem like a good one.
Yeah, so that's an opportunity, right? If you take that as a you instead create some transition time. Maybe you say like, okay, there's going to be a half an hour where I know there's going to be this transition from this, if you have that time, right? Which many of us don't actually. That's probably too long of a time, but maybe 10 minutes or however much time you can spend in transitioning and being explicit with the child of like, okay, you were there, and now we're here. Now we have certain things that we have to do. These are your expectations. Boom, boom, and boom. This is what you have to do. And giving them very clearly what you want them to do instead of focusing on what you don't want them to do is a great way to help them to learn to transition. And the behavioral term is it's differential reinforcement of other behaviors. So basically what you do is you say, these are the things that I don't want to see more of. I'm going to actively kind of ignore those things. I'm not going to answer you if you're whining or you're screaming. But at the same time, I'm going to give you the opportunity.
Would you say that? Like, I'm not going to answer you if you're whining or screaming, or would you just ignore
Sure.
that?
Sure. Yeah, I would set that as the expectation. But then you say that and then don't say anything else, right? So you don't want to get stuck in the rut of saying repeatedly, I'm not going to answer you if you're whining. I'm not going to answer you if you're whining, because now you're inadvertently reinforcing the whining because you're giving it attention, even if it's negative attention. But yeah, sure, setting the expectation, I'm not going to answer you if you're whining, and then ignoring while giving the opportunity to do something that you would genuinely think is pretty cool if they did, and then giving them praise for doing that thing. If it's going to the table, oh, I'm so impressed at how you came right over to the table and you sat down. That while term would be actively ignoring the thing, you're not ignoring them. You're ignoring that specific behavior, and you're actually like waiting to catch them doing the thing that you want them to do, and then you're pouncing with love. Differential reinforcement of other behaviors. So the short answer for fostering children's comfort with other kids is teaching distress tolerance in a variety of ways. Because then when they're uncomfortable with other kids, they're able to tolerate that, just a little bit more, and therefore they have more room to relearn social skills and interaction. Okay, so let me just see. So the other thing I did want to refer to, so there's this, the CDC on their website has this interesting decision-making tool for school versus no school. And there's like a series of questionnaires on there that I actually, they just thought they were interesting about weighing, pros and cons of school with safety measures versus not. I wanted to point that out. And a decisional balance is just a particular type of exercise. It's basically a pro-con list, but it's pro-cons of each decision. So it's 4 quadrants as a way of making a decision around school. It's just some more behavioral stuff. And then these are resources that some are more general, and so I would just point to them. From the American Psychological Association, this Judge Baker Children's Center has a great set of resources like across the board for children in mental health. So I don't know if, I don't know, maybe we could send that in the email. Like
Yeah, I was just going to say, if you're able to share with us your slides, we'll be happy to include that in the email with the recording link and all of that tomorrow. Absolutely.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's all I have for tonight. Thanks everybody for coming.
Again, thank you, Kevin. That was again, as always, it's such a pleasure to hear you speak, and it really does help put things in perspective. I didn't realize I was doing what you were telling me all along until you actually put a word to find, like ignoring the bad behavior and just reinforcing good behavior. So didn't know that there was an actual term. I knew I was doing the right thing. I just didn't know what it was called. But thank you guys so much. Again, this whole webinar was recorded. We will send the information along with Kevin's email if you'd like to email him directly with any other questions. And we hope you guys enjoyed the talk, and good luck. We're all here. So thank you, Kevin.
Together.
Have a good night. Bye, everybody.